I came across some news on Canada's taxpayer-funded CBC, equivalent to Australia's ABC, about a new street sign in Vancouver, British Columbia's largest city. Vancouver's Trutch Street to officially be renamed following unanimous council vote. It sounds fairly innocuous, but when you look into it, there seems to be a lot of controversy. Here's the Kitsilano neighbourhood where the street is found, and here's the offending street. Well, the old name, Trutch Street. Here's a map of the street. First of all, why did they rename it? According to an article from the CBC from 2021, Vancouver City Council unanimously passed a motion Thursday night to rename Trutch Street because of racist policies against Indigenous people enacted by BC's first Lieutenant Governor, Joseph Trutch. Here's a couple of pictures of Mr Trutch. He was a British-born engineer and surveyor who played a key role in negotiating British Columbia's entry into the Canadian Confederation, and also oversaw the construction of the Alexandra Suspension Bridge, considered an engineering marvel for its time. The bridge was a crucial transportation link, playing a vital role in the economic development of British Columbia, linking the goldfields with coastal supply hubs. However, despite his achievements, because Mr Trutch is accused of implementing racist policies and expressing contempt towards Indigenous peoples, his street sign has now been removed. Take that, man who died over 120 years ago. But the most interesting part of this news story is the new name. And no, this is not a joke. Literally, my best attempt at reading this would be 6 to the power of W, me, theta, K to the power of W, I, Masem Street. To be fair to the new street name, according to the CBC, the pronunciation is šxʷməthkվəy awesome. And I don't even know if I'm saying that correctly. By the way, Musqueam View is the English translation, with the Musqueam First Nation people being the traditional inhabitants of the Greater Vancouver region. Vancouver Mayor Ken Sim was delighted with the new unreadable and unpronounceable name. He tweeted, "Today we address a historic injustice and take another step forward on the path towards reconciliation. With the renaming of Trutch Street to Musqueam Awesome Street, we recognise and honour the Musqueam people and their long-standing connection to this land." Here he is with his crew standing in front of the new street sign. You'd think there's nothing else going on in Vancouver. Oh wait, Metro Vancouver's housing market worsens, now pricing out even high earners. Over 450 homeless people died in British Columbia in 2023, according to Coroner, meaning deaths have nearly tripled in just a 4-year period. Vancouver decriminalised drugs, but 2 years on, users are still dying. I don't understand. How can hard drugs like heroin and fentanyl still kill people now that they're decriminalised? But nah, we don't need to worry about that. Let's just erect a new street sign. Okay, but seriously, there are a few issues with this renaming that I'd like to address. Firstly, obviously, the Musqueam people never had street signs, in that they never had streets. Streets were a concept brought in by European settlers. The idea of renaming a street in a traditional Musqueam language doesn't seem to make much sense. If they created a new totem pole or something like that, then perhaps we could all understand the significance. But renaming a European-created street as some sort of symbol of reconciliation just doesn't seem very appropriate to me. Secondly, the Musqueam language, like most Canadian Indigenous languages, did not have a written script prior to European contact. I'm sure they were capable of doing lots of other things. Surviving in such a cold climate would have been incredibly difficult. But one of those things was not writing. So why create a sign in a written language that they traditionally didn't use or create? Thirdly, and this is the most obvious issue, the sign is completely unreadable. Why write the sign in a script that almost no Canadian can read? Canada is primarily an English and French-speaking country. If you're going to put up street signs, they should really be in a script that all Canadians can read. At least in Australia, Aboriginal languages are written using Roman script. Perhaps we don't understand the meaning, but we can at least attempt to read it. Although they do have strange exceptions, like the world's largest sand island, formerly known as Fraser Island, is Gurri with a silent K. But don't get me started on that. I would argue that people all over the world can at least attempt to read English as they are familiar with it. Even my 70-year-old Chinese mother-in-law can attempt to read this sign and do a pretty decent job, even though she doesn't have a clue what it means. The same with French. I might not be able to understand it, but I can at least attempt to read it. Librairie. What the hell is that supposed to mean? But this language, this written script, isn't anything that most people have even seen. I'm not here to criticise its academic and linguistic merit. I'm sure linguists in conjunction with the Musqueam community have spent a lot of time creating it, but it clearly isn't readable by most of the population. It's essentially a functionally useless sign. It's not here to inform, it's here to placate, a vain attempt by the local government to convince the Musqueam people that they're doing something about reconciliation, when actually they're doing almost nothing, except perhaps making everyone's lives difficult by erecting unreadable signs. The National Post, for example, reported, "Vancouver renaming street," I still can't read it, "puts people at risk. Good luck telling 911 your address." They make a fair point. Could this become a safety issue, especially knowing that Canada has a high immigrant population who might struggle with these signs? Not to mention the poor residents who live on the street. Do they have to write the new name in full, or can they use the English translation? Remembering they're used to writing Trutch Street. I wonder if they were consulted. By the way, what if it was found out in the future that the Musqueam people had committed horrible acts of racism or whatever? Do we have to rename the street again? Look, if the local community democratically agreed to rename the street, okay, fine, but at least make it something that everyone can understand and read.